Going to make, going to have a go at painting blossoms. So it's a continuation of the flowers painting project, but I thought sort of flowers in the context of a landscape, like autumn trees, or it could be bluebells or daffodils or something like that. So I thought I'd use that image in a bit. So this was one I did on site a couple of weeks ago at Sutton Road Cemetery. So that's that one. This is acrylic, so I thought I'd have a go in acrylic. So I normally use oils for this sort of subject, but having a go practicing with acrylics a little bit. That one. And that was the demo so far from this morning. So I thought I'd do a different one this afternoon. I found with this sort of subject, particularly not so much this particular tree, but some of these trees need something like a rose colour or a magenta colour. So to get those sort of really rich, deep, sort of pinky colours, quite often it's something quite a rich colour to achieve that. So that's so yeah, as I say, I'll probably make this the last week of this particular project. The project next month or next couple of weeks, if you wanted to do this, is looking at fabric. So it could be like a little still life set up. You could go for it, if you wanted to have a go at this, it could be like a plain piece of fabric, would be the easiest, or if you want to go for something more challenging, it could be patterns, stripes, whatever you fancy. You could, so if you did fancy taking part in that one, then just bring along a piece of fabric, maybe an object if you wanted to go with it. So it's not just fabric, but the focus will be on, my demo is on fabric. So this is in response to somebody that wanted a little bit more tuition on fabric painting. So that'll be the next couple of weeks. Yeah, so this month, 3-week month, as I'm taking the last week off on holiday. Right, okay, so this particular tree, I just put a little bit darker background so some of this stands out, because I was worried it wouldn't stand out against that tone. You could, sometimes I might start with a little bit of tree trunk, but I don't always paint that in too solidly to start with, so it would be more just sort of planning it out. So the main tree trunk is going to go here, and this is acrylics, so it's got the advantage that it will dry quite quickly, so I can kind of overpaint layers. So I think that would be enough for the time being for the tree trunk. And perhaps a little bit, I'll tell you what, maybe a little bit of the highlight on that side too. So I'm just using a grey and brown mix here to get those sort of, and that's going to need to go a tiny bit lighter still, just on that side, to get where the light's catching. So the light, I think is kind of, yeah it is, it's very much coming down this way. We've got the shadows over here, so a little bit highlight there. With these sort of subjects, I tend to start with the darker tones. So where you've got a mixture of like little twigs and blossoms in shadow, I tend to like to work that in first. So I've got this grey mix and I'll start to make it a little bit pinker. So I'm adding a tiny bit of magenta to that and see how that looks. I think probably darker still actually. Let's go with some brown, perhaps a little bit of brown and blue to make a grey. So these areas, and what I tend to look for is like big sweeps of tone or colour. So these areas under here where it's all quite in shadow, a bit like that, and rather than get too caught up in individual blossoms too early, I try and look for kind of sweeps of colour and shadow. So there's another quite strong shadow here. Getting that dark enough. It might be that the sky could go a little bit lighter there. This particular board is quite a rough surface, so it's one that I've used as a demo before and just keep over painting. But I quite like that. I quite like the way it sort of it's got a little bit of texture, so it breaks up the brushwork a little bit and feels a bit more natural for a tree. So again, more shadows sort of under here. I could work some of the branches in. So that would be some of the background. Let's make that a little bit darker. and I think in this weather it's going to dry quite quickly. The finer lines I'll do with a smaller brush. And the next stage will be that sort of mid-tone. Swap to another brush. So it's kind of pink. I'm going to just experiment with the colours I've got here. This is an orangey red. No, it's more of a, that's not quite right actually. It wants to be, I think, go with either a rose or a magenta, something like that. Something more like that kind of colour. And just going to, again, just grey that down a little bit for some of the blossoms in shadow. So a little bit of blue and a little bit of brown into the mix. So I want to go a bit lighter than this, but not too light too quickly. So some of these areas sort of under here. A bit like that. Here, that's a bit more grey. And then going a lighter still, so just white mostly what's on my brush off, and add some more white to the mix, and just a tiny bit more of the magenta. This is where it's getting, yeah, a lot lighter. So again, some of these areas are a tiny bit darker there. Just trying to break it down into a series of tones, tone values. And even with a brush that size, I can still make some little marks with the corner of the brush if I want to. So you don't necessarily need a tiny brush for suggesting blossoms. You can. And what I look for is these kind of waves of movement through the tree. So there's a little bit coming back here. Pick up on that, and that stands out against some of these shadowy areas. I know in the past I've found that when I've painted blossom trees, when I've been outside, sometimes I've gone far too light too quickly, and I've ended up having to paint darks around shades, which is quite awkward really. So it's better to, if you can, to get the darks in early on. The other thing is sometimes just with this slightly textured board, I quite like that sort of dry brush look, so that not everything is absolutely in focus. So you might have some areas that, again, this is something that I'm just experimenting a little bit with. You get some areas that almost like slightly out of focus, soft focus, something a bit like that. And then probably to finish it, probably go even lighter still, so it's almost, sorry, not the wrong colour, almost pure white. And I'll work some of that in. Lighter still. And it is somewhere where you could perhaps experiment. I'm tempted at this stage to go with a smaller brush, just to vary it a little bit. So I've got some bigger marks, there's some smaller marks. That's something like. Vary it. Yeah, so I mean, with this kind of subject, I would paint all this background in first, really. And having looking at it now, and I think some of the sky could go a little bit lighter. I'll just do it a bit lighter in places. Generally, you paint the sky first, but then sometimes it's quite nice to do what they all call more sort of negative painting, so that sometimes you see artists painting trees, just painting sort of dots, or what they call sky holes, sort of into there. Like that. Maybe soften that out a little bit. Fingers. And And then individual twigs, I would need thinner. I've got a rigger here. Riggers are quite good brushes, but twigs. Oh, there we go. That's really good. So if you've got something like that kind of brush, it's a nice long thin, and you can get a nice fluid line with that. So again, I'll go back to something a little bit darker. And twigs. Let's go in here. And if they're too heavy, you can actually just wipe them back a little bit. And make that a little bit more fluid so the paint flows. And if they seem too pronounced, I'll just soften them a little bit with my fingers. So yeah, it's a little bit of a new departure for me trying out the acrylics, but I think actually it's quite nice because you can almost sort of layer them up quite quickly. It wouldn't matter too much if I'm painting white over pink because it's just going to pick up, you know, the pink. But some colours, if I've sort of painted all this blue and then start putting the pink over the top, sometimes they pick up and it can be a bit awkward. All good? Anyway, cheers. Any questions? No, all good. Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's not traditional.